Hey everyone, it's Summer with AstariaSen, and it's another Witchy Wisdoms Wednesdays. It's the third week of it. We have one more week to go, which is next week. And since there was 4 of us, we all got to pick like something for each week. And this is my week. Guess what I picked? Can anybody guess? Fairies? Well, fae, or any kind of fae or whatever. So if you want to jump in, you could do anything about fae related for a video, a VR to this. You can do your fairy altars. You can do your experiences with fae. You can do your questions about fae. You can do anything you know about fae. You can do fairy books. You can do fairy drawings. You can do fairy art. Whatever it is you want to do, just go ahead and jump in and do it. I'll go watch it. Anyway, so I decided I was going to, because this is supposed to be about learning and about experiencing and something new coming in. So I decided that I'm going to show you which books I use, relate back to, go through, do all my research on, and just continually work fae with. And I have a lot of books in front of me right now, but there's a lot of books I don't have that I've read previously, but I don't actually own. They're still on their way, but I borrowed them from the library. So I did order some more fairy books. So no, I think it's going to take a while to get because all the shipping is a little off. So it might be next week or the week after that I get my new fairy books. But anyway, so I wanted to show you the ones that I have and talk to you about them and why I think they're important for what I do. The first one is going to be one by Emily Carding. Now, if you're a beginner, I'm not talking about fairy folklore. I'm not talking about Grimm's fairy tales or anything like that. If you're a beginner and wanting to connect with the fae, wanting to learn a little bit more about connecting with the fae, about altars, about meditations, about fairy art, about fairy artists, about fairy offerings, about fairy gatherings, all those kinds of things, and you just want to be involved in that, and you just want to start somewhere, this book by Emily Carding is my recommendation. I just finished it actually last week, and I did a whole, I think it was 7 videos on this book, and I will leave a link up here so you can go check that out. But this book right here has 8, it actually has 8 chapters in it, and it goes over everything. It goes over a lot of different stuff. Let me see, just to give you an example, let's see if I can get into the contents real quick, because I don't want to make this video super long. So they have connecting with the fae, knowledge about the fae, trusting the fae, honor, magic, inspiration, balance, and she's got acknowledgement. She's got a bibliography in here about where she got some of her information and an index for you to look stuff up. So if you get the chance to get this, I would recommend this book, especially if you're just starting out wanting to connect with fairies. All right, and then the next one, if you are also connecting with fairies, and I did a book review on this one as well, which I can leave a link to the video up here. It is Connecting with the Fairies Made Easy by Flavia Kate Peters. Now this book right here, the reason why I originally got it is because it has like moon bathing and fairy circling and stuff like that. This is more about how to strengthen it and how to look for fairy in the everyday world without it being a fairy right in front of your face. Like, how can you see a fairy when you can't see a fairy, right? Or any kind of fae for that matter, because sometimes they don't present themselves to you like you would think they would. So in here, she talks about different ways that they might be in your world that you may not have realized. So this is a good one for beginners as well. I'm currently reading this one right here, which is a brand new book for 2020. It's Fairy Guide to the Lore, Magic, and the World of the Good Folk by John T. Cruz. I'm not very far into this book, but I can tell you right now, just from reading the portions that I have and all the highlighting I have been doing already in this book, it is very well done. There's going to be a lot of folklore in this book. There's going to be a lot of information based on the folklore in this book, and it's mostly based off the British Isles. Like, he's very specific about which kind of fairies he's talking about. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Okay, yeah, he says, I have almost exclusively concentrated on the folklore of the British Isles, by which I mean Britain, along with Orkney, Shetland, and the Isle of Man. So it's all the folklore about fae along those lines. So that's this one right here. So far, I'm going to tell you that I'm going to recommend this book. Just reading what I have already, it's a very great resource for fairy folklore and fairy information. So I'm totally saying get this book. And it's brand new, so I'm really excited about that. And then we're going to get a little bit into some fairy books. Like my grandmother was really sweet, and she picked me up some old books. This one right here is by Thomas Keightley. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And it's The World Guide to Gnomes, Fairies, Elves, and Other Little People. This book right here, I have been like flipping in and out of. It does a lot of fairy stories. It's folklore. That's what it is, okay? It's the origin. It talks about like the fairy mythology right off the bat. It smells like an old book too. And let's see. I mean, it has a lot of information in here. Like the table of contents alone. Look at how big this table of contents is, guys. That's huge. That's a huge table of contents. And you're looking at fae stuff in Oriental romance, Middle Age romance, fairyland, Suspense of the Fairy Queen. Scandinavian has elves, dwarfs, a ton of stories in the Scandinavian area. The Northern Islands, and it talks about Iceland and Shetland and Orkney and probably some of the stuff that I'm going to be reading in that other book. And then it's got a bunch of stuff about Germany ones, Switzerland ones, Great Britain, Celts, Ireland, Scottish Highlands, the Isle of Man, Wales, Brittany, Southern Europe, France, Eastern Europe, Africans. I mean, there is so much information, so many fairy stories in this book. It is amazing. So I'm really, really glad that I got this book. I have randomly gone through and read some of the stories. I don't know that I have a favorite one yet because I haven't actually like sat down and read all of them. There are so many in here that it's going to take me a while to get through. But I have read some of them and I find them very intriguing, very not what I was expecting. So that's one of the folklorish ones. And then another one is by Rosalind Carvin. And it's Fairies, Elves, and Goblins, the Old Stories. And I'll just read you what it says on the back, okay? Fairies, elves, goblins, leprechauns, brownies, spriggans, and many other supernatural beings leap vividly off the page in this haunting collection of 25 classic fairy tales, richly embroidered with the examples of ancient fairy lore. Talks about fairy tribes, the British Isles, enchantments, morals, dangerous tricks, ancient spells to summon fairies to your house, tremble at the shape-shifting powers of dangerous fairy queens, and learn how to protect yourself from the terrors of fairy abduction. It's got some illustrations by Arthur Rackham, and he's a very old fairy artist. And it has a bunch of different stuff in it too. And I'm, again, going through this book. This was also a present from my grandmother. This one talks a lot about the fairy tribes, like little stories of the fairies, like Hob Thrush, Midwife to the Fairies, the Bogey's Field, stuff like that. I mean, it's just got a lot of different stuff in it. And it's got art in it too, so I'm pretty excited about that. But yeah, so I've gone through a couple of the stuff in this one. What do I have back here that's like labeled here? A Brewery of Eggshells. Okay. I don't know why I have that one highlighted, but it is. So that's interesting. I think it has to do, I was looking up something for the letter E, so that's interesting though. But yeah, it's got a lot of interesting stories in it. And so if you're interested in some folklore and some more stories on fae, so you can kind of get your own feet wet in a different way without other people's intrusions, you can look at some folklore books. That should really help you. Let's see. The other ones that I have in here are a little more fun-based books, more along the lines of like personal experience or very fun type things, okay? So the first one I'll do is Brian Froud. and it's his book on fairies, and it's described and illustrated by Brown Froud and Alan Lee. And this book right here talks about the different kinds of fairies, but with Brian Froud, and I'm sure many of you have heard his name, he is an artist. He is an artist who connects in his own way with the fae and the fae realm, with fairyland. And in here, they do a lot of stuff. They talk about fairy origins. They go into Norse mythology, Icelandic versions, fairies in other places like the Middle Kingdoms, Christianity. They talk about the realm of the fairy, like where is fairyland. And they talk about Avalon. They talk about how a fairy might reveal itself. And of course, you know, there's all the artwork that goes with it. So there's a ton about that. They talk about invitations. They talk about fairy musicians and melodies. The legend of the Knock Grafton. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. Sorry. They talk about fairy rings in here. So a lot of this is going to be like legends and stuff like that. And then they do talk about like the different kinds, like the Spriggans. Fairies on the Easton and fairy islands. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here. A lot of stuff. And I really like this kind of book because it has so much depth, so much character to it. There's a lot going on in the book. So it's one of my favorites. The artwork, of course, by Brian Froud is phenomenal. How can it not be, right? But he talks about the different fae that he's encountered. And let me see. They've got Selkies in here. There's just a lot of information still. Like, it doesn't seem like it's a lot of information. She even talks about the Unseelie Court too, and the Seelie Court, and Puck, and the Puka, and the Bogey, and yeah, it's just a lot of information, but it's more fun information. It's a more experience-based information, and I do consider Brian Froud to be exceptionally well in tune with fae, so I do like reading his stuff on it, and I like referring back to his stuff on it, and I enjoy a lot of his decks even. So, and then the last one that I have currently available to me to show you is the Fairy Handbook, and this is actually done by the editors of Fairy Magazine. So, and this book right here has a lot of fun stuff in it. Let's see, it's got gilded pages too. Like, this is my fun book. Like, look at the gilded pages on this book. I haven't done a review on this book yet, but it's got a lot of stuff in it. It's got garden stuff in it. It even talks about like little fairy garden art. Fairy architecture. It goes into a lot of different stuff. So let me see here, right here in the contents, you can get arts and culture, food and entertainment, flora and fauna. They've got resources. They've got a bibliography. They've got an introduction. They talk about where fairies might live. They talk about the different kinds of fairies, like pixies, the she, the trolls, the leprechauns, gnomes, goblins, the Seelie and Unseelie courts. They talk about fairyland, but it's not as in-depth as, say, some of the other books that we just walked through a little bit of. They do a lot of they talk about fairy culture, architecture, I guess, like how they might decorate the insides of their homes and stuff like that. So this got some really cool stuff in here about that. And it shows you how you can even craft your own fairy furniture. So that's pretty cool. So it's got its own crafts in here. It's got some really beautiful artwork too. So this book right here is more fun-based for me. It's got, you know, tea time cakes that you can do. What is this one? It's got fairy party tips if you're planning a fairy party. And I mean, the amount of information that's fun in this one is really cool. They've got fairy lollipops, edible stuff that's fairy-related, garden parties. There's also, they talk about like fairy portals and pathways. There's a lot of information in this book as well. It even talks about Brian Froud too. So, and the Cotton Link Fairy Hoax. So there's a lot of information in here and in all the other books. So if you are interested in any of the fae stuff that I've talked about, feel free to look through these books because that's where I get a lot of my information from, other than internet sources and books that I have coming to me that I don't actually have in my possession currently. I do have other fairy books, but they're not the ones that I look to the most. They're mostly just ones that are literally just fun for me, not really something I put out there for everybody else because I like the artwork in them or something like that. So I hope this was beneficial to you. If you're interested in getting any of these books, they'll be linked down in the description to any of the ones that I can link down in the description. Some of them may be out of print. I'm not really sure. I haven't looked it up. So thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to watch the other ladies at the end of this video. I will leave links to a playlist where you can find all of our Witchy Wisdoms Wednesdays videos. Have a very awesome day.